In 3, 2, 1. Jared, you're wearing a chainsaw shirt. You've been hosting a Habitat podcast for a long time. You've talked about a lot of TSI work. You've done a lot of TSI work. Surely you've had a sketchy chainsaw story. Maybe someone cut a tree and it fell where no one was wanting it to fall. Maybe one fell early because it was all rotten through the middle or something like that. Do you have a sketchy chainsaw story that you might not want your wife to hear, or your mother, or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on, guys. Look forward to this for a while now. Yeah, I used to be pretty embarrassed by this story, and I didn't tell anybody for quite a while because, I'm embarrassed. But
Right, yeah.
I've been running a saw now for probably 7, 8 years, and by means no expert. Um, but I was out on my first property. I do everything usually by myself, one man team, which is again
Mm-hmm.
not smart with a chainsaw. And I was cutting through a tree, felling the tree, and it was rotten. So it starts to fall, and I step out of the way, and I was videotaping it to try to get some content. So I'm doing a couple things at once here. And a branch, probably about the size of a baseball bat, maybe 6 foot long, snapped off the top of the tree as it
Mm.
fell. So the tree is falling to the side. I'm stepped away to the side, but this branch comes down right on the top of the helmet. And
Oh,
I didn't fall over or anything, so it kind of missed me, but it hit me in the head.
yeah.
And ever since then, I'm like, okay, that's why you wear your chaps and your helmet, even if you're
Yep.
doing something you've done a million times. Like it was winter time, I was out there by myself. Could have
Yeah,
gone
could have
about
been.
10 different ways wrong, right? So
Oh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
who?
advise people to wear their
being in the
helmets.
winter, it could have just knocked you out and you got frostbite, by the
Yep.
time you come to or something. Yeah.
Ken, who
That's-
are we talking to that it was like their coworker or something, like the tree fell on him and he was by himself and it actually knocked him out, and the only reason anyone found him is because his phone did the like whole "are you okay?" and then it called 911 because it jostled around.
I you must have been talking about that with somebody else. I have not heard that story.
That's okay. Well, guys, the guy who's running our excavator, he told me this story, and this is crazy. Not our excavator. We got an excavator on the property because we were tearing down a couple bins,
Cool.
and I go, dude, what's the scariest moment you've ever had with this thing? He's like, well, I was on the side of the river, the Skunk River, I think it was, and I was pulling out big trees. Well, and you got to keep in mind, this excavator, he's like, this is a 50,000-pound excavator. And a tree fell down early, like it basically, he dug up enough dirt that it didn't have enough root system. It fell down earlier. And the root system under him picked him up in the excavator, like the leverage picked him up.
Oh.
Yep. And he said he threw it into reverse. So as the tree was falling, he was rolling back off of the root system, but it picked him up and tipped him forward. And that is
man.
horrifying, dude.
Oh man.
Yeah, it is terrifying. Holy cow. Well, we're going to go ahead and end this podcast. We're all going to go hug our family members.
Yeah. My heart rate monitor is going up right now.
Yeah, that's yeah, that's terrifying. But it brings about a real truth. Well, it's interesting. I had to stop at the tire shop before we started this podcast this morning, and I was talking with a guy about split rims, so old style, farm equipment, trucks. I suppose at one time, maybe even the majority of vehicles had split rims, which is kind of like this band that goes around the outside, or like a plate that goes around the outside of the rim and holds down the bead of the tire, is the way I understand it. And some people call them suicide rims, widowmakers. You get enough pressure behind those things, they separate, and I think they just literally bust off the rim like a bullet. And there's a friend of mine, who he's like in his mid 60s now. So his dad owned a auto shop when he was a kid growing up there, and he and it's interesting because his dad was a World War II vet, in the European theater, and he would not allow. So this is a guy who's accustomed to danger, right? Like he lived danger, and he even would race, kind of semi-professionally or amateur, I guess, would race like stock cars and stuff, and he would not allow his sons to be anywhere near one of those rims when he was working on it. Like that's how dangerous they were. But it's a part of the reality of doing, some of the work that the three of us do here on this podcast is you really have to, as Carol would say, Nicholas, be observant and be paying attention at all times. And sometimes I'm almost thankful for those close calls like that you talked about there, Jared, with the tree branch, because the second thing you said after you told that story is, now I always make sure I'm looking around, I'm way back, I'm not, complacent. And I guarantee you, Andrew, the guy who runs the excavator, who's a very good operator, by the way, and he can't be more than like 22 years old. I bet you he thinks about that every time he's in a similar position. And I think it's kind of good to go through those close calls, because should be a lesson learned for life.
I totally agree. We were talking camp before we hit the record button. Like, we have kids to get home to. We have stuff to do.
Yep.
I have goals I want to accomplish in life. So if I get taken out by a random tree, that would suck. So
yeah, is this how it's gonna end?
I was gonna die in war, but just a branch fell on my head, and this was it. Talking to Sam Peter. So I'm curious. You walk into a wooded area, or you observe a wooded area. I imagine people either hire you or friends. They say like, "Hey, can you come look at my woodlands?" You go in.
Yep.
First three things you're looking at when you're in a woodland area, and why? Like, what are you looking for?
Good question. Looking for open canopy percentage. Looking for invasives, and looking for timber value as well, to maybe help fund a project or get people started in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. What percentage are you trying to have the canopy be open?
That all kind of depends, but I like 50%, or more.
Wow.
Wow, that's more than I would have expected.
A lot of places I go, almost all the properties I visited on the consulting side of things need to be cut. I mean, I bet there's 3 out of 100 that maybe it's opposite, where it's a clear cut situation, or they bought a farm that was already logged. But I mean, by far the vast majority have a too mature of timber for wildlife value, and it needs to get cut. So I mean, I can almost tell you every place I go to, I'm gonna walk in and go, all right, get a forester on board first. You can even do that before I show up, and just start to get that ball rolling. So.
Are you using a state forester when you do that usually, or do you have? Are there some like a Splund, or is Davies the other one?
Oh, sure.
Like those big teams of loggers that go all over the country. I mean, who are you when you say call in a forester? Who are you going to?
Good question. I think it really can vary. If whoever can get there to the person's property in the area, whoever is a good fit for the job. A lot of them are so busy right now, so either state or private. I'll go either way. I've had both, and usually it's who's local to that area. If I have a forester in Michigan and I'm in Ohio, they might not want to travel and do work down there or whatever. So I usually leave that up to the client. But I do think that state foresters are great. They're just very busy as well. So it really depends on who can get there and get the job done per the goals of the landowner.
Yeah. What's a red flag when a forester shows up and you're like, ooh, we might need to look somewhere else?
When they all talk about like timber value only, you get, because I mean they're in forestry, right? So they're They're
Right.
always about the health of the forest and or the timber value, which is great because they have to get paid. I get it. But wildlife goals don't are not always synonymous with timber value goals, right? So
Hmm.
that's a little bit of a red flag. So I would just urge folks that if you are walking with a forester, I would urge you to. Every time I do, I learn something. But get your
Yeah.
goals, convey your goals clearly from the very beginning, and that way, the guy can realize, okay, we might want to cut this one a little harder than maybe a select cut. So that's
Hmm.
really probably it. Loggers, again, now skipping past the forester and going to a logger, a lot of red flags can be seen, and I've dealt with most of them, unfortunately, as well as my friends with their properties and their projects. So that's the forester will help you, as a little bit of an insurance policy if he hires his logger and he kind of runs the show for you. He takes his
Hmm.
percentage, but then again, he's kind of on the line too, and you have a lesser chance of being, high graded or anything like that, where they'll take all your good
What
trees and leave you the junk.
what are the
Yeah.
red flags of the loggers?
Yeah, great question. The stuff that I've dealt with would be getting the project started on time, getting it finished, um, taking everything they're supposed to take. For instance, on my 40 acres, I needed it done quickly, and they were already delaying forever. So, like, they didn't take a lot of the shagbark hickory or younger soft maple that was still there that I wanted to take the aspen. Supposed to take all the aspen. They took the nice big soft maple and the oaks and got out. So that's
Hmm.
what you can be. That's called being high graded, and that can happen to folks because it's a lot more work to take the junk trees. They can
Yeah.
they can get their good stuff and get paid and get out. Another one can be your roads when you're done. It'd be nice to have in the contract. At least fix my roads back up to where they were before you guys got here, type situation. Um,
Just because they get all rutted up
yeah,
from a cat being in there and stuff
very
like that.
very rutted up, and I understand there's some of that comes with the logging. It's going to be a
Hmm.
mess, but there are things like that you got to watch out for. Payment, you know, um, yeah, there's a few different things a few nightmares I've heard and gone through. So
I'm going to give you two scenarios, and this may or may not have happened to my family twice. Um, uh, they've had loggers approach them. So, we noticed you got a real nice timber back there, and one guy even admitted to walking through it. Like, it shows up. Who are you? Oh, I'm a logger. Yeah, I was walking in your timber back there, and so like just blatantly trespassing,
no, man,
and both times my family has gone with these loggers that have approached them. And overall, I don't think anything too egregious has happened to the properties as a result of that. But I did notice one. I walked with a state forester because it was after I had been listening to Wired to Hunt. I've been listening to your podcast, the Habitat podcast, and it was either you or Mark, or maybe both of you guys, stressed that importance of working with a qualified forester. And so this happened before I think both properties were logged. No, one property was logged. Maybe I'd hunted 1 year, and so I didn't really understand anything about habitat other than like it's important because I was a biology teacher, But I didn't understand the nuances of manipulating an ecosystem to make it healthier, and so I had a forester come in after the fact, and her comments, she was great. Her comments were like, next time if your family decides to log, call me first, and then I can help make sure that this is done in the best way possible. And she even mentions like, man, they really did get all the walnuts, didn't they? Like she was like saying they came through and whatever they could, other than maybe like a few like really odd shaped, not good timber value trees, they got pretty much all the walnut trees out of, that 40-acre piece of timber. And I kind of noticed that too. Then years later, and I didn't even know anything about the second one until I went back there to hang a tree stand in the summer. I'm like, holy cow, what happened in here? And I was told, yeah, this guy knocked on our door and he told us he'd pay us this much. And so we said, go for it. Walking around, there's like, man, there's like no walnuts left. I mean, is that almost always a bad situation if the logger approaches you first? Or, I mean, what would you coach somebody to do in that situation, Jared?
Oh man, yeah, that's tough. I would definitely, for just more often than not, I'd get a forester in there first. I'm sure there are great loggers out there. I haven't met a ton of them yet, but I'm sure there are great loggers out there that are trustworthy.
You just have to make sure they're not also Packer fans. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. If they have a Lions shirt on, we're good to go. I mean, they're gonna try to pay you. I mean, the less they pay you, the more they make, right? That could, I mean,
Yep.
that's in a lot of business, cost versus revenue. Like I get it, but most likely, if you were to shop it out instead, or get a couple logging mills, competing for your bid, you're gonna get more for the trees, the same trees. So,
Yeah.
and then, again, the forester has a responsibility to run that job to what it's supposed to be ran as and to the requirements of the contract, and they're going to hold them accountable.
Right.
If they come there and they give you X amount of money and they get your trees out, great. Maybe that was perfect, but I'm sure there were some other things that could have been done again, like taking some of the unwanted species out of there, other stuff that would help the habitat that is just going to cost them money. So unless they have to do it, why would they do it? So
Yeah.
I would always urge you to work with a forester first. Maybe after you've done a few jobs and the loggers personally, that's a different story. Get in there and cut and don't leave me hanging. Then that can be done. But yeah, I'd always go with the forester.
Yeah. Well, I was not planning to quite go this route in this conversation, but I think this is some of the most useful information. Like I said, that situation has happened to my family twice now. So I imagine it's a pretty common practice if someone's tuning into this and you own, some timber, and maybe, usually if you're a whitetail guy and you are the landowner, not just a permission piece or in the family piece, you're the guy calling the shots. You're probably going to be pretty well in tune with what's going on and what's happening, and you're gonna approach some guy banging on your door saying he was really impressed by his timber when he was walking through it. You're gonna be like, yeah, by principle, I'm not going with you. But a lot of people who maybe aren't interested in hunting, and they're a landowner that has some forested acres, I would say it's probably pretty likely someone's going to show up at your door someday, wanting to tap into that resource that you have. And so this is very practical advice from Jared here.
Well, I got a question about forestry, and maybe it's nothing you've ever dealt with. Have you ever helped landowners with carbon credits with their forested areas?
I haven't. That's super interesting too, because if you can get that to work out in your favor, and get signed up for it, the benefits would be great, right? Tax benefits, all that, environmental benefits. But I have not dove into that very deeply.
We were at Pheasant Fest.
Forest Carbon Works is who you're thinking of, Nicholas.
Yeah. So we were at Pheasant Fest, and we had a booth right next to ours, and that's what they did, is Forest Carbon Works, and they're not paying us to say this. Super nice guys. They're across the U.S., but I don't know. I kept thinking,
they're
like,
across
there's gotta
the
be a
Nicholas
catch.
got
There's
cut out
got to
there.
be a catch. And the whole thing is like they show up, they measure your trees, and then basically they come back every year measuring your trees, and they kind of pay you for the difference, right? Because that's how much your trees are catching carbon.
Cool.
Cool program. I think basically if you have a forested area, it's just like, it's not like life-changing cash, but it's like a little bit a little more cash in your pocket every year for an area that I don't think you have to do anything with. But yeah, I'd check it out. Forest Carbon Works.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll definitely check that
I
out.
think it's, and I mean, you hear the criticisms all the time, which are somewhat, I think what's a fair concern sometimes becomes accepted as a true, like, problem, and so you'll hear this with solar as well. Like, oh yeah, I would never lease any acres to a solar developer because how do you know they're not going to stick you with all the equipment cleanup down the road and all that? And the answer is have a good attorney, right? You just make it very clear in the contract what it's going to take for you to participate in the deal, and people will make the same arguments about, like, and again, I think they're good risks to bring up, but I think you can protect yourself from them. And a similar thing happens when people sign up for carbon credits with their forest programs, and yeah, but what's the catch? I sure would hate to be stuck not being able to do anything with, and so find the outfit that matches those demands. And I remember with Forest Carbon Works, which we need to have these guys on the show at some point, Nicholas. We talked about that when we were at Pheasant Fest. But the guidelines that they told us is you're not supposed to harvest more than 10% of your timber. I believe it's each year of the contract. So you can even still do some cutting for, habitat improvement work or maybe just need firewood. But those programs do seem to be pretty well airtight, as far as safe and a good thing to be involved in. So, okay, here's a question I have about the soil in a timber. Generally, it seems most forest soils end up acidic. Is that a typical general situation, Jared?
I would say so. Yeah. I haven't soil tested every woods that I've been in, but I do agree with that. It seems like if trees are going to grow there and get the ferns and everything else, usually trends that direction. Yeah, and I mean, I've
Oh,
not been on a lot of places that I've had plots or done with that the soil's already where it needs to be. It could be amended, it could grow, it could become more, full of biology. So,
sure. So so going back to earlier in the conversation when you're saying you're looking at you want to have like what was it, a 50% open canopy throughout a forest. I assume when you're making these clearings, you're growing either bedding cover or some kind of food plot or feeding area, transition area, screen, something like that. Every time if you're cutting trees, you're probably going to be trying to bring that pH up a little bit. And if you don't, which I imagine is a common problem, I could see people having a real hard time getting something to grow.
yeah, and it's not even the real hard time as much as it is to grow to the plant's full potential. As you
Sure,
guys know,
stunted.
yeah, it'd be stunted or even the nutrients, the taste, things like that. Um, Usually the nutrient uptake, if it plants in a better buffer zone of the pH level, um, everything becomes more available for it, and it's healthier, tastes better, grows better. Yeah, so you can still get stuff to grow in a 5 soil or a 4 soil, um, but it's just not up to its full potential.
Yeah, yeah. So soil tests are important. Skip has talked about that quite a bit in the past, Nicholas. Just the importance. I think he says whenever he gets a new piece of ground that he's going to be doing work on, he first thing he does is a bunch of soil testing to figure out what can grow there now, how it's going to work with what he wants to grow there. And I imagine even or especially when you're clearing some once forested ground for that, I imagine it's even more important. Which brings us to our. Okay,
well, I
go
wanted
ahead,
to ask. Nothing worse than you're listening to a podcast and someone asks a banger question and no one has any answers for it. But and I'm worried that this will be this because it's so weird. But like, humans seem to enjoy taste of something with nutrients up until a point, and we've kind of evolved past the nutrients we need. Now we just we like things that have sugar in them. And but for like deer, or we talk a lot about native pasture for cows, you know, is there taste basically like if it's better for them, it tastes better for them, so they eat it first? Is that how that goes, or do they actually have like a weird nuanced taste bud system? Anybody know?
Good question. I know that they are concentrate selectors, right? So when they're browsing, they naturally know which leaf of a plant has more nutrients than the plant next to it, or a soybean plant. Um, but I've never talked to one of the deer about what they like to taste better. So that's interesting.
I know, that's what I'm trying to figure out, if they're like,
Yeah.
if anybody's found like, well, even though this thing doesn't have as much nutrients in it, they just love this thing.
Well,
I
I
don't
think
know.
where I have seen that
I
is
find
where
that fascinating.
where it's lacking. No, I mean, sorry, not to interrupt. Where there's low herbaceous vegetation and it's lacking, you'll have deer eating autumn olive plants and ash trees
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So it probably has something to do
Hmm.
with the carrying capacity of the habitat and the deer population too, on what they'll prefer and what they have to eat.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and you know when we were putting together our whitetail mix, seed mix of different native forbs, and doing that research, I found that, like, well, what do deer actually like eating? We found that Riley and I put quite a bit of research into that, and uh, we found that a lot of the mint family, or like really strong smelling species, were not preferred by deer. Now I don't think it's like, I think sometimes people look at that as like not preferred, as like repellent, like it's repulsive to them. They'll walk out of their way to avoid it, and that's not the case. They don't like browsing on it. And I gotta think, because deer have smell is a part of taste. I got to think that because they have such a strong, smelling sense, that they, something that's super pungent or overbearing or very aromatic is probably just overwhelming to them, would be my guess as to how taste factors into it. Nicholas?
All right. Well, I believe you. I was just curious about that. I'm trying to figure out if they like cake or not.
I think you need to ask AI.
Ask
Maybe
AI.
AI.
The farthest
maybe,
thing away from a deer you
Yeah.
could possibly have. I wonder if we started feeding animals sugar, like if it would be as yummy for them as it is for us. I'm sure that's been studied.
Yeah, definitely. I remember when I was a kid, we used to go backpacking in southwest Montana, and there was a mule deer that my dad would throw marshmallows to, and man, she couldn't get enough of those marshmallows, So there's got to be something like that. But so part of this conversation that people are probably wondering if we're gonna just avoid it to be super nice, or if we're gonna go in with it and talk about it. Some of this tension that I'm sure you understand well, Jared. Where the conservation world and the deer hunting world can collide, which is not very many times. Like in most cases, they walk in tandem pretty well, and both support the other. And there is, however, this one aspect of, and our friend Doug Duran refers to it as the whitetail industrial complex. And I think he got that phrase from another friend of ours, Ryan Callahan. The idea of this is all about deer are here for the hunter, right? And deer hunting is all about the experience of the hunter. You know, they want to have fun. They want to, you know, meet life goals of shooting the biggest buck, and they want to have something to eat, and it can almost become this extraction aspect or activity, I guess is a better word, an extraction activity as opposed to a conservation based activity. And we had Doug was just here with us last week, and we talked about you know, hunting by itself is an extraction activity. It really is. And to just say hunting is conservation, which is something you probably remember being preached, you know, on every hunting podcast, probably my own included, 5 years ago. Hunting is conservation. Hunting is conservation, and people like Doug and you know, Doug kind of opened my eyes to it, and I know other guys have kind of started to come around. We can look at it and be like, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't really resembling conservation. We're making decisions for the forest that are not necessarily based on, man, this is going to be really good for the pileated woodpeckers. No, it's man, this is going to help me kill more deer, and or this is going to be really good for the water quality versus, man, that's going to be a great kill plot spot. I can put my stand right over here, and I'm going to have a chance at, you know, an awesome buck. And that reality, I think, is kind of that realization is kind of a new one, I think, in the whitetail world. And it seems like a lot of people are starting to like come around to it, you know, like, yeah, you know, it's maybe we do need to look at this deeper. But there's also some that are like, don't bother me with that. I just want good hunting. I guess first of all, what are your comments on this reality that we're kind of seeing more and more in the deer habitat space?
Yeah, that's all a good take, and I think that, I mean, even if somebody's not doing everything they could for the benefit of the land, the habitat, and the wildlife, I guess hunting is conservation, maybe because you're buying a license and that those funds are going to maybe some real programs. But on a personal level, I know what you're saying. I think people are more educated now. You know, there's so much content out there at your fingertips that you can listen to.
Yeah,
And
that's a
even
good
myself,
point.
I'm talking about different stuff these days on the podcast than 7 years ago when I started, for sure.
Sure.
Like, I don't even want to go back and hear it type stuff, you know, because it's like, wow,
Yeah.
you learned a
Oh,
lot.
I hear that,
And
dude. I hear
Yeah.
that.
yeah, and it's just, I would say you don't know what you don't know, so maybe there's a gap. I'm sure there's a gap there on what people can be educated on and make decisions on. But I mean, the habitat thing's definitely been more of a focus. I'm seeing it more on everybody's property. Used to be just talking about how to kill a big deer, how to kill a big deer. Now you see everybody
Mm-hmm.
doing TSI and native grass plantings and stuff like that. Not everybody, but more so than 5 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think the education part of that is a really good take. You know, there is so much more information available now, and in some ways you kind of wonder, well, what took so long? Because we all, you probably remember this, Jared. Everyone used to always just refer to prairie as CRP. You know, oh, I got some CRP over there, and it had nothing to do with like being a part of a federally funded conservation program. It's just like, that's what we know, tall grass that is native. We know it as CRP. And that wasn't that long ago. That was 5 years ago, I would say, when that was what the majority of people. Now people are starting to say native grasses or prairie. And so I think your take on education being such a big part of this evolution, I think, is huge. What I guess a thing that I try to we recently talked with Patrick Kaiser And Nicholas, I remember you asked him before we started recording, I was like, is there anything you really want to convey here in this podcast? Like there's a main point you want us to hit on. Do you remember what it was, Nicholas? I'm putting you on the spot here.
working landscape.
Yes, the working landscape. He said, I want people to understand that I think it's important that we have a working landscape where and he's a guy who highly values conservation, right? He's an expert in native plants and how they're used for pasturing animals, livestock. And I kind of view deer hunting as that question needs to be answered to some degree, and I don't think it's the same as livestock because you're dealing purely with nature when you're dealing with deer hunting. You're dealing with a wild animal in a wild place in a wild ecosystem, and so it's not the same as like dealing with where am I going to be sticking my cows or my goats or whatever. But how do you? I guess there's no right answer here, and this isn't a gotcha question by any means. But how do we determine, like, yeah, a certain percentage of this farm can be a corn kill plot or a soybean kill plot or a brassica kill plot, and another percentage of it's going to be native tree and prairie species. I mean, how, like, where, I guess what I'm asking you to do is shake the crystal ball here a little bit, and as we continue to mature in this conversation, what conclusion do we come to with hunting and how the land is used?
That's an interesting question. I think when I look at it, I try to use every usable inch of my farm and improve that. It's only 40 acres, so you're limited on what you can do. But I think that if you can make every inch of it better, that's what I try to do. It's what I would convey in my plans for folks too. I don't know what the actual percentage would be, but I think that it depends what your goals are too, really. And not everybody cares about the stuff that we care about. So that can be what's hard. I'd say the more the better, You got some guys who just want to go out there and throw some corn down and shoot a couple deer, and that's what they're happy with. That's all they're going to do. They're not going to put all the extra blood, sweat, and tears into the stuff that we care about. So yeah, I try to just maximize every bit I can, honestly, because you only have so much.
Yeah,
I'm curious about the perennial food plot, like the native perennial food plot. From what I could tell, and I did research it quite a bit. I could totally be wrong. We were the first company to have, that's a product that we have, right? I'm sure people put them in, but they had to go to a native seed company and be like, hey, I want a bunch of things that are good for deer that are native. I'm sure that happened, but in fact, I know what happened because that's how I got the idea. Someone came to me with that idea. But I'm curious because we're getting more and more orders for that, in the hunting world. And I'm actually not, I think people would listen to me and think I'm totally against a food plot like a brassica or a sorghum or something. And I'm not at all. I just think that it actually makes more sense to put the perennial food plot and the native perennial food plot right next to the annual food plot, because then you train the whitetail that you have food here all year, and then they've got something that they really desire towards in the fall, and they're hanging out there. So it makes it for the hunting to go better. But I or at least that's my theory. And I'm curious, have you, because we're getting more orders, and it could just be that our website's attracting more people. I'm curious if you ever see that where people are like, well, can we put down some perennial things that'll keep them concentrate selecting?
Yeah, great question. And I think I think I'll look at that a couple different ways. We do get that request. I own a food plot seed company with a partner as well. I think you guys, your site's great. I love the mixes on there. I try to get a lot of my native stuff by working on what's already there, in the forest by giving it
Mm-hmm.
sunlight. A lot, there's, as you guys both know, there's thousands and millions of seeds that are sitting there ready to go.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but we have done orders, custom orders for folks who want to put in more natives, like you're talking about, themselves. Maybe they're converting a cornfield that's been tilled and killed for, how many years. So we've actually done that. We've actually put together mixes, not too far unlike yours, where guys want that right away. They don't want to manage cool season
Mm-hmm.
grasses and wait for all. They want it right away to get that. And I would also agree that having that next to a brassica plot or a clover plot or something is awesome. And that's kind of what happens on my farms. The early successional growth right next to my food plot is ragweed, pokeweed, young forest stuff that is native that they're going to eat. Um, and a lot of the times that's got more protein and stuff in it than some of the seeds we plant. So I don't look at food
Mm-hmm.
plots as a way to feed deer as much as a native forest or native ecosystem. I look at them as the ice cream after dinner type thing.
Mm.
To get them maybe to where I want them for an archery
Mm,
opportunity, um, to get on camera, stuff like that. So I totally agree with you. One next to the other would be preferred.
man,
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that take. To me, that balances it well. Because what I don't want is I don't want I'm not trying for people that hunt to hear us say like, you need to quit doing that and just plant prairie. Quit going after deer.
Right.
Why are you going after deer? My
Yeah.
whole goal is because I'm a strong believer in win-wins. My whole goal is to say that actually the working landscape um, works helps. You're gonna see bigger bucks. You're gonna see more deer on your landscape. And actually, we're working on a project right now with some of the big names in the whitetail industry and people who really believe in like the working landscape and seeing these native perennials and what they do for the not just the ecosystem but hunting. The hunting
Yeah.
goes better. So I as a non-hunter, I got to be careful because I don't want to say like, hey, this is the authority. So when I'm talking to people on the phone, I lean a lot on like, well, this is what Dr. Mark Turner says, right? This is what Skip Sly from the Iowa Whitetail Forum. This is what he says, and so I just start rolling through those things, and I've learned a lot. And it's a big part of the reason we wanted to have you on is just so that we could learn and really keep a pulse on where hunters are at because I don't believe because you're a hunter, you're a conservationist. I do like that the tags support things, but I will say tons and tons and tons of the hunters that I interact with, and I imagine that's what they're like, even the ones I don't interact with, are conservationists. They
Absolutely.
really do care. So I think that's true, and I don't want to take that away from hunters. But then I get to sit
And
down with
I
people
would
like you, Jared, and learn and be able to connect with them at a deeper level.
I would even go a little bit further there, Nicholas, with that statement and say that the best, like the most passionate conservationists, not always probably, but almost always participate in hunting as well. And I
Is that
think
true?
I think the reason that is the case is because they have a very valuable stake in um, uh, conservation working out. Right? They have a very a tangible thing that they put a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of their. I mean, let's be honest, Jared. We could both probably list. I bet you we could go for 15 or 20 minutes between the two of us just going back and forth listing people who live their life around uh, deer and have a very strong conservation ethic because of that relationship, that care for deer or some other animal, elk, bear hunting, whatever. But I think that a lot of hunters, it can be like this extra drive. That was something Carol used to talk about a lot. Was in fact, is when I interviewed here with you, Nicholas, and is when I first met Carol, and he talked about, well, it's good that you have drive because that'll motivate you when times are hard, you know, and that I think that drive of having that hunting motivation can be a huge and has been through time a huge motivator for folks who care about conservation. Not always, but oftentimes is true. Along those lines, you know, of you know, making good choices that's good for the land, but also having an understanding for where maybe some of these non-native plots make sense. I got to witness this for the first time this spring, Jared. I got invited to shed hunt with a friend, and this is kind of in good sharing the land practice here, Nicholas. While I was there, they know that I work on a prairie farm, and they're like, hey, we got some prairie that needs burned per our CRP contract, and we're kind of nervous about it. And so they had me help them burn. And I was kind of nervous about it, to be honest with you, because it'd been so long since, and I've done a few prairie burns where it's been, you know, most contracts require once every 10 years. And there's guys that go that whole 9 or 10 years before they burn. And there is so much, my friend Luke Fritch and I call it underburn, that's going on, where you have all this thatch close to the ground that just stays so hot and just keeps burning and burning. And so I was kind of nervous about it. But what they had there, because they were huge whitetail guys, is they had a clover fire break around their prairies. And man, did that work well. And so I think that in the idea of a working landscape, it makes a whole lot of sense to have that cool season fire break growing, or some people will plant some of that in their timber, I'm sure, you know, to kind of keep things from going out of control in the timber because of its early green up time. And so I think that's another great way.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We've done some work with the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund, and some of the natives that they like to plant, a percentage they like to have clover in there for some of the pollinators, and that's exactly how I set it up. As the fire breaks around that, or even a CRP contract, you can have a certain percentage in food plots or whatever else, but the fire break, like a clover fire break, that's benefiting two or three things right there, right? Get your fire break, you're pollinating, you're feeding wildlife. I mean, that's a win-win-win.
Yeah. So I think it's a great example of where a non-native species can be used, and also guys do them for trails too. You know, if you're gonna, you know, to kind of go back to what Nicholas was stating, if we follow the logical progression of nope, it's got to be 100% native 100% of the time, then should you really even have trails on your property? Maybe you should just, you know, hoof it around your property and walk, you know, through the timber like a deer would, you know, and so I think that even, you know, erosion control on some of those trails, I think clover makes a lot of sense for that as well.
I'm curious about, like, I've talked about it before, but you would have your pulse on it better, Jared. The evolution of hunters seems to be they kill a buck, they want a bigger buck, and then they start to notice, you know, resource issues. So they start to care about resources. And then all of a sudden they change from just caring about the resource to like overall conservation and birds and pollinators and soil and water. And then somewhere in there they start really caring about the next generation as well. Not an exact science of how that evolution goes, but I'm curious if you've seen that and like if you would speak to that at all.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good pulse. I would say, you know, as a hunter, we covered this in a certain podcast I did a while back. I remember now that you're saying it. And you start out just wanting to shoot anything, right? And then you want to shoot numbers, like a ton of deer or whatever. And then it becomes, okay, maybe a certain deer or age caliber. And then you, like you said, you get into the habitat stuff. You want your kids to, so I would say the evolution is pretty accurate. And I would say I have definitely hit that pretty close, you know.
Hmm.
Starting to get, more into land ownership, spending my money on land and improving land and my time. It's literally who I am, like as a person. But it didn't start that way. So there's something, I would say something along those lines is how a lot of people go. Definitely.
Yeah.
Man, when in your have you been hunting since you were a kid? Like when did you start hunting?
Yeah, it's like 12. So I'm
Oh yeah,
38, so quite a while.
yeah, 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, man, soon to be Ken's age.
Oh
And
wow, thanks, man.
no, Kent's younger than you, I think technically. I'm just going based on like I can hear his knees crack and stuff when he stands, and I don't know.
Whatever. I'm in way better health than Nicholas.
Guys, Jared, listen to this. So Kent, one day we're hoeing weeds, me, him, and Riley, and he all of a sudden remembers something. Guys,
Nick
guess
cut
what?
out on his story
My
here.
cholesterol went down. I was at the doctor's office. My cholesterol went down, and I was like, man, that's so exciting for you, Kent. Well, he hasn't stopped saying that. He just on bad days.
Yeah,
he
man.
goes he'll
They call me
whisper it to
old
himself.
every day, but
He'll
health wise,
whisper to
I'm
himself
10
like,
years younger than these guys.
we'll be making fun of him, and he'll be like, "Don't worry, Kent. Your cholesterol went down." He's like saying it to himself, like he's trying to encourage himself.
That's amazing.
Well,
My triglycerides are down.
So
yeah.
I'm curious.
That's right.
Well, yeah, you gotta be tracking those. Look, guys, everyone out there, if you're over the age of 30, you gotta be going to your yearly doctor appointment. I'm not quite there yet. Okay, so you're hunting from 12. When did you have the crazy idea of like, you know what? I'm gonna start one of the first whitetail hunting podcasts.
Yeah, great question. So that was probably back in 2016, I'd say. So fresh out of college,
Wow.
in the corporate world, driving, commute, doing all that fun stuff, and got really into the QDMA. What used to be, when now it's NDA. They had a forum back then. Before Facebook and all that, the forums were popular.
Mm-hmm.
And there was their forum was extremely knowledgeable. I mean, guys like us three on there just highlighting their farms and their projects. It was, the very niche part of the hunters that were on there. And I just got enthralled with following along with people's forums. They post a project about their 80 acres, what it looks like, and then you can follow it through the years and all the projects they've done and the cabin they build and the family they brought out, everything.
Wow.
So I just liked doing that, and I wanted to get my own piece someday so I could do that. Nobody in my family ever owned any land, so I had this urge that I wanted to do that, and then I wanted to learn more about it. So you can read and read and read all day long, but I liked listening to podcasts too. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe I can, record some of these because my memory is not 1,000%, so I can remember and go back and have this stuff versus reading it, maybe forgetting some of it. So that's kind of how that idea got started. I was a big Wired to Hunt listener, as I'm sure a lot of people were. So Mark inspired me there, and I just thought,
In
nobody's really talking about
2016?
the habitat things.
Crazy.
Yeah, so I owned habitatpodcast.com for like a year and a half before I even did anything with it,
Oh,
which was
nice. Smart move.
well, yeah, but I wish I would have fired off another year earlier into this space,
Yeah.
right? With how saturated
Yep.
it gets now. 1 year back then would have been monumental. But yeah,
Yeah.
so
Oh, yeah.
that's just kind of this idea, and then it got some traction, and shoot, man, haven't stopped since. I think we're over 7 years, 340 something episodes. Like, how much time is that? That's so much time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Oh.
becomes part of your life, really. You guys know, you guys are podcasters, you get it.
Yep.
Man,
Yep.
when when you were doing it, when you first started, is there anything you would change?
Well, let's see. I don't know. I think everybody's past kind of writes the story for how you get to where you are, but nah, not exactly. I mean, I guess the journalism side, the skills and or the the knowledge. I always wish you had more or better of that, but I wouldn't be where I am now if I didn't start and keep trugging along. So I guess I wouldn't really
Yeah.
change too much of it.
You ever go
Yeah.
back and listen to some of those first episodes?
No.
Oh man, dude. I wanted to delete them so bad, but Jay Cofer was like, "You can't delete those. They're part of your story." And I was like, "Oh, they're
Yeah.
so terrible."
There's some,
I hate
but there's
even
some
bringing
good,
them up on podcasts.
but there's,
I know someone's gonna go back and listen.
well, here's something Jared could probably relate to. And I mean, when you're a new podcaster, you aren't as good of a question asker. You get better at that and better at having good conversation on the show and stuff like that. But you still can have some pretty amazing guests, even in those first few podcasts that alone, the content that you get from there, the insight you get from there just is so valuable, which brings me to something that I really wanted to ask you about. And maybe you don't have a great answer for this, Jared, but the like practical application stuff you've had to just glean so much through 300 and what was it, 360 some episodes, 70 some episodes. I mean, you've talked with so many experts. One I really want to know about, and this would help us here at Hoxie even possibly, herbicide is a big part of doing habitat management work. And I know that is there's probably even regular podcast listeners that right now are getting a little annoyed at me bringing it up because they're anti any kind of pesticide. And I can understand that point of view. I don't think that, I don't think somebody is wrong if they choose to go that path. But I do think that there is a false understanding that all farms could be managed with all exclusion of pesticides and still have a lot of the things that we want to have or even deem necessary for society. So to me, probably the most base level example of this is no-till farming. No-till farming means you're going to have a lot of weed pressure. Tillage wasn't just to create a nice, soft medium of soil for a good, easy planting season. That was definitely a part of it, or incorporating fertilizer, things like that it was used for, breaking up compaction. Part of it was weed management too. No-till cultivators. We got a few old Buffalo no-till cultivators sitting out here at Hoxie that Carroll experimented with in his early days of growing prairie plants in a no-till fashion. And the idea was you could run that shank down the in between the rows of your production field and take care of some of the weed pressure. And so herbicides have developed in tandem with the very wide adoption of no-till farming practices. And so to have, and again, I don't really like, kind of like I don't like the phrase hunting is conservation. I don't like it when corn and bean farmers say they're feeding the world, because I don't think that that's fully accurate either. I think it is in some degrees, or in certain ways it is, but I should say to a certain degree is true, but certainly not in such a broad manner.
Jared's
But
like,
the
these
fact
guys
remains-
are gonna give me canceled. These guys are gonna give
Yeah.
my podcast off air.
Well, I won't say what Luke Fritch would say there, that we would get canceled. But a lot of the food that the world And again, I don't even always like to call it food. I like to call it calories. A lot of the calories that the world consumes does come from large scale industrial style agriculture. And if you want to have 8 billion people, you got to have enough calories to support 8 billion people. And so herbicides are a necessary part to keep all these people that I think we would all agree, even the most ardent anti pesticide person would say, yeah, I don't really want to, eliminate a certain percentage of the world's population to make it work that we don't need to grow that much food. That would be, I don't know, what do they call it? Like genocidal or something like that. That'd be terrible, right? So, like, just working through the logic here, I think that there is a place for pesticide use, but it needs to be responsible. It needs to be calculated, and it needs to be minimized where it can be. That being said, leaving the food side of it and going more to like the habitat management, like what Jared you do, and prairie establishment, like all of us do, in places like the Midwest where we have such fertile soils and so many centuries of invasive plants that have taken hold here in and in an invasive way want to establish themselves in a monoculture fashion. Herbicide is a critically important tool to try and regain the upper hand. And so if you're listening to this, don't just tune this out. Listen to what we work through here. But have you come across any herbicides that you have found particularly helpful in maybe preparing the way for a new prairie planting, or maybe encouraging that native seed bank to come back without, by getting rid of the invasives and not harming the natives? Do you have any or like a regimen that you do that's kind of a go-to thing that you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yeah, and great comments there teeing this up. I would agree. Um, I would not want to have to manage all my property or any property without the use of some herbicide. Sure, it can be done, but it's going to be an uphill battle. It's tough. Cool season grasses are an enemy of mine. So I like there's three that I use. When you were asking the question, I was thinking about it. And when I use herbicides, I use them maybe twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it depends if you're treating invasives or this and that. That can be spread out. But yeah, so in getting a prairie or native grasses established, I'll use glyphosate in the fall
Mm-hmm.
on an area after, when it's cool season time to kill the grasses and prep
Yeah,
that seed bed.
walk us through the conditions there.
Sure.
When what are you looking for in like the weather forecast, or what are you looking for on the ground, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I like to, if I'm going to say plant some native grasses, I like
Yep.
to wait till like October, early October, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll spray glyphosate to kill any cool season plants that are there that are going to be the first to rise in the spring as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that being said, I'll wipe that out in the fall after the warm season stuff is already dead or dying for the year. Then that spring, I'll use, if I don't frost seed, or even if I do frost seed the natives, I'll use simazine as a pre-emergent to
Okay.
try to get some of those cool season grasses that are going to come up and compete with my prairie style grasses. Withhold them a little bit if you can. And that's really it. I use clethodim as well for grass treatment among maybe a
Mm-hmm.
clover stand or something like that if they get too overtaken with grasses. Um,
Sure.
I just think herbicides are a tool in your tool belt. I know it's cliche, but it's how I view it. And I use them sparingly. I do. I follow the label. I use them maybe twice a year. Um, and I think it's responsible to don't more is not always better. You don't need more. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
I think that if you don't have to go all no herbicide, and you don't have to go the full end where you're just dumping Roundup everywhere. I think there's
Right.
definitely a safe, happy medium to be effective. Because the plants that you guys are trying to establish and that I'm trying to establish, they, the invasives and the cool season stuff are way more prolific and can smoke that stuff right out. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
necessary, in my opinion, when establishing stuff like this.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
absolutely.
can literally waste a seeding if you don't have the right preparation down. And yeah, it's neat to hear what other people do, and you've had some pretty good success with that, with establishing your prairie with that glyphosate and simazine or simazine regimen.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
When do you
Yeah.
when do you
This year,
plant then?
oh, go ahead.
Well,
I was just gonna ask, when do you plant after the simazine? Because the simazine 60-day that you need to wait, or
I did it this year, and I'm always experimenting too. I mixed it this year. I had a power line that was worked up from an ice storm up north, so the crews were in there doing new lines and stuff all spring, and it was just bare dirt. Um,
mm,
so what I did was I applied simazine, and then we just did a little bit, which to get something going, I'll maybe work the ground, and then I applied the simazine right then and planted. At the same time, I planted some switchgrass, and as the simazine effectiveness went away, the switchgrass germinated, set roots, and took off. And this was Father's Day, so we're talking early June.
mm-hmm.
And now, right now, I have like 6 to 8 inch tall switchgrass in that spot. Um, Not a lot of
That's
weed
really
pressure.
interesting.
But in the past, I've frost seeded and then hit the simazine. But I only had a certain amount of time. I'm like, I'm gonna try planting this in June and see what happens. And ended up working out really well. So the
Yeah.
residual, I
man?
think, determines how much you want to put in there as well. I did like a lighter treatment, but yeah, you got to watch that residual, Nicholas, to how long that stays active in the soil for, along with any herbicide really.
Man,
And the other the other so that and then also when you're doing a monoculture of just switchgrass, that takes out a lot of variables too. So you do have to be careful. Read your labels. It's amazing what all is included in those labels. I mean, they break it down by species of common weeds, but also maybe some things that you would want to have in there. A lot of times I've found on labels, and just do your research and make sure that it's going to be compatible with your mix. Nicholas and I are working on a theory right now, so I'm not gonna. It has to do with native annual weeds, but we're not gonna reveal our theory yet until we get some expert weigh in on it. But I think it could help people, feel better about their prairie establishment and be more patient with the ugly phase, and
Sure.
have a because that is part of it too. The first few years, and also have maybe some better mowing practices that um, foster more diversity coming from your seeding. If it's a prairie that is planted, so yeah, that's all good insight there for sure. Um,
I,
do,
oh, sorry.
I was going to follow up on that. What is, and maybe you haven't really come across this problem yet, Jared, but if you do have a prairie that comes up and you're just seeing that, man, I thought I had a good, I thought I got things prepared well, but man, it's really getting dominated by a handful of different weed species. Is there anything that is like your go-to method for, like a really spotty, weedy prairie?
Well, I'd say mowing would work for something like that, depending. That's usually how I do some of the switchgrass stuff. A good mow will take out a lot of some of the, you know, herbaceous stuff, thistle, stuff like that you don't really want in there. Um, do you
Sure.
guys mow your prairie establishments to control
Yeah,
some of the weeds like that too?
first year and a half is
Absolutely. Yep.
is usually, yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So
Yep.
Okay.
like the first year we keep it mowed, and then the second year, Dad always taught us keep it mowed until the 4th of July, and then
Okay.
from there you should get your first kind of prairie grass stand that second year, and then the next year the forbs kind of do their thing as well in that third year. But
And I-
3 years is a lot to on the front end, when someone calls and they say, "Hey, I want to spend $2,000," and I say, "Awesome, you're going to see it in 3 years." That's a tough sell,
Yeah.
but people
Yeah, if you do
they've got the
the
patience. Yeah,
and if you do the work the right way, I mean, the payoff is just so huge and long lasting. It's a
yeah.
long term payout. So, yeah, I think it's all important stuff that helps lower the barrier to people getting involved with using prairie as part of their habitat plans.
All right, but so we'll have to go here in a little bit, Jared. But a couple things. First, I want to go through a little bit of a lightning round to help me understand deer hunting better, and then we can move on from there. But you ready? You get a pick
Yeah, let's do it.
to do one of the you get to pick one of the two to do really, really well. Okay. Bedding or food plot.
Betting.
Okay. Bedding or water source.
Betting.
Okay. Bedding or south facing slope.
One and the same. Betting.
Okay.
Betting on the south facing slope is what I'm saying.
Yeah. What bedding or you talk a lot about cover, and to me they seem different, but maybe you're about to tell me they're the same.
Exactly. I wanted to expound on what I mean by betting at some point in the lightning round. Betting can be food and cover, so that's why to me it wins. It's the best part, and also with our crazy deer here in Michigan, we have a lot of hunting pressure, so cover works well here too to foster the stuff that I'm looking for.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that you know when you I think kind of playing off of that, Jared, the thing that is a hard one for me to answer is the amount of grassland type habitat cover versus timbered cover, and what's the ratio you want on a farm. But I think we can agree that if you have no trees, it's really hard to come across any kind of concentration of deer. And so in Michigan, you guys have way more forested acres than what we have here in Iowa throughout much of the state. If you guys, I gotta think that if you guys just if you had let's say you bought like a 40-acre production field, and if you just walked away from that for 25 years, it would be a forest, is the way I kind of understand it. So I guess to kind of conclude our lightning round here, what would be the right ratio you're shooting for with that bedding cover? How much of it would you want wooded versus how much would you want in grassland?
Yeah, I don't know if I have an exact percentage on that. Is more of I want both and I want diversity. I think that if you have an open field, like one of my clients who just worked with, he is all open. We planted a native grass mix there, we burned it, planted it. Like that's going to be the prescription there. I'm not gonna go plant 1,000 oak trees and wait 20 years when I can do a prairie, and get my goals achieved there. So I think it depends on what you're dealing with, if you have an open farm or a wooded farm. But if you're all wooded, you know, it's hard to get a prairie established in the woods. So you have to kind of deal with what you're working with. If I could perfectly set it up, I think 50-50 of prairie and woods. Thinking of this farm in Iowa that I'm gonna hunt this fall. It's the most gorgeous farm, and it's literally wooded draws with prairie as CRP
Wow.
contract throughout there, and we don't even worry about food plots. Maybe a little Milo plot here and there, but it's I would probably do like a 50-50. But what's more important to me is diversity on the parcel, with having both
Sure.
the woods and the prairie if you can.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that
I
bedding
think
that I
that's
was
a great
talking
answer.
about with Nick is early successional habitat. Anything 5 foot and below is what matters to the critters, right? So for the
Yeah.
most part, so if we
That's
can
right.
get that, like I'm trying to make a oak savanna in my woods right now. Um, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I like.
Right. Yeah. That's great. I like that answer. Okay, Nicholas, you want to wrap this one up?
I definitely can. Well, my internet's pooping on me, guys. I'm so sorry. It'll just force me to have to go back and listen to it, and that'll be good for me. But Jared, you obviously carry a ton of knowledge. I mean, an authority on habitat for whitetail deer. I'm curious if people are like, I need to know more about this guy. Where can they find you?
Yeah, thank you, Nicholas. I appreciate the kind words. Habitat Podcast is the podcast. Sorry, I got the kids running around like crazy in here.
Yeah,
That's
it's
good.
Habitat
good.
I know
Podcast.
how that
We're
goes.
Yeah, it's a good time. We've interviewed hundreds of folks on there, and just I'm passionate about it. I love applying everybody's ideas. Talking to you guys here today, even to kind of my portrait, if you will. So the Habitat Podcast, we talk about just making your land better for wildlife habitat. Naturally,
Mm,
hunting, improves with that. So habitatpodcast.com.
Wow.
yep. That's
Awesome.
awesome.
Well,
You're
guys, just as strong of a mind as Jared has, we know that conservation can only move forward and can only happen one mind at a time.